In the larger conversation around racism, the experience of shadeism often goes unacknowledged. It's the discrimination of being made to feel too light or too dark as a person of color, and it's a prejudice that Black Canadians know all too well. Today, we're going to dive into this issue in a two-part panel. Lifestyle expert Anne-Marie Mediwake and dancer and choreographer AC Mensah join us now to share their perspectives. Thank you so much for being a part of this conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
AC, you're a successful dancer and choreographer. We'll start with you, and you've done a lot of work inspired by the reality of shadeism. How have you commonly experienced shadeism in your industry?
I was often told that I was too dark to be in music videos, too dark for contracts. Oftentimes, I wouldn't be casted or overlooked. And so I realized, in the midpoint of my career that there was a ceiling that I actually couldn't obtain, though, even though my talent would shatter it, my shade would often not give me the chance to be able to move past it. And so it was something that I wrestled with, and I'm grateful that I did, because then it ended up transforming into a lot of the work that I did years later.
And I watched your TED Talk on the topic, and it's one of those conversations that I think doesn't happen often enough. Natalie, as a mixed-race woman with lighter skin, you've experienced both privilege and prejudice when it comes to shadeism. What does shadeism feel like to you?
For me, it makes me feel guilty, actually. I know that there is a privilege that comes with having light skin. I know that there are doors that have been opened for me because people feel safe with me. I'm Black enough that I will tick a diversity box, but white enough to not offend people. So I actually feel quite guilty. I wish that I were darker at times, because I feel like there's been a responsibility and privilege given to me throughout my work that I don't necessarily deserve any more than anyone else.
AC, there is racism that exists between communities, but there's also discrimination within a community. Sometimes that sentiment can come, more from those that we love and those who look like us. Why do you think that is?
I think, the generational trauma that is very present in our communities, the people that were given access, the families that were ripped apart, is really embedded deep into our cellular DNA. And so even though we might, continue to procreate and continue to birth lineages, that those seeds are very much so in place. So you might get a grandmother that say, oh, I only want to favor my light-skinned child, but it's generally because of the trauma that she has felt, that she doesn't feel like being dark-skinned, there's any value to that. And that's the reason why she actually wants to give favor to that child. And then the dark-skinned child then also feels excluded in that family. And then that cycle just continues. And I feel we really need to be able to shift and separate and really be able to draw a line in the sand to say what we don't want to necessarily carry forward. And those are not the seeds that we want to keep planting into our children.
No, absolutely. And Natalie, you're a mom to 3 mixed-race children who happen to be different shades themselves. They're still quite young, but you've started talking to your eldest about shadeism. How do you approach this subject?
I moved him to a school, actually, where it moved him out of his little bubble, I felt, into somewhere that was more diverse. So that way, the people that he would encounter day to day, he, being a white passing child, he is the minority. And so I just wanted to have different shades, part of his day-to-day life growing up. So it's not something that he sees as different, or he will judge as being any less than he is. Saying that, though, as AC was saying, it is generational. It is generational in terms of dark-skinned and light-skinned and how someone is preferred. And it's something that we really need to shake. And I will do what I can in terms of showing my boys that there is no need for this, but it's really something that I need to deal with myself, I think, first, and really understand that moving forward in order to better equip my children for dealing with it.
Absolutely. AC, I have another question for you, but we'll hold that for the second part of this panel. It is a very important conversation, and I want to thank you both as this discussion continues after 8:30. We'll talk about how to break the cycle of Shadeism in Canada and around the world. Thank you guys again so much for joining us.
Thank you.
In a panel discussion earlier today, we talked about the reality of Shadeism and the discrimination of people of color that they experience when their skin is deemed too light or too dark. We'd like to continue that conversation now, welcoming back lifestyle expert Natalie Preddy and choreographer AC Mensah. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Hi.
Now, Natalie, you've lived and traveled around the world, and people might be surprised to learn that you've experienced the most Shadeism here in Canada. Why do you think that is?
I think here in Canada, there is more of, as we were saying earlier, it's more systemic. So, we have unfortunately things, like racism not racism, slavery rather, in North America. And so the proximity to whiteness, I feel like that has really offered a lot more privilege than elsewhere. So I believe that it's within North America, there's more of a pressure to choose. You are either team black or team white. And I find that that's less of an issue elsewhere in the world.
AC, you started your own dance production because you were having difficulty booking jobs as a darker skinned woman. What needs to shift so that others aren't excluded in the way that you were?
I think it's a mindset. It's a choice, and makes a big difference when you are somebody that has a seat at the table, because then you actually are given the chance to shift the way that people think. That was a big reason for me to continue to speak out about this, was because I didn't want other dancers to go through. And when you'd speak to people in certain management positions, they often sometimes didn't even realize their own bias. So I feel like a lot of times, to give us an opportunity to really open up our blind spots and our peripheries to our own biases that we have adopted in order to actually shift and open up opportunities for everybody.
No, absolutely. And Natalie, a big part of this journey for you has been finding self-love and self-acceptance within your own community. Where are you at today in that process?
I'm still working on it. It's very much a daily journey. I've met some phenomenal people online that are also feeling the same way, trying to navigate this biracial, mixed race space. I think not meeting also other Black women who don't necessarily look at me as the enemy, and realizing that we're all in this together. And I'm getting there. I'm working on it.
AC, you gave an incredible TED Talk on Shadeism, and you say it wasn't until that point that you really processed its impact on you. What was kind of your biggest takeaway?
My coach really challenged me to see a lot of the situations that I went through very differently. And so when I did my TED Talk, that was the first time that I even came to terms with the fact that somebody said, well, you're too dark for this job. And she asked me, how does it feel? And I was like, I hadn't even unpacked that. I actually hadn't even given myself a chance to really understand what that felt for me on a cellular level, to be able to really just express the hurt that I felt, the ability to swallow someone's words when they say that to you. Within this industry, it's you have to develop a thick skin. So for me to be able to have the chance to express myself and to heal, a lot of times, a lot of the things that I had experienced in my career when I did my talk was very empowering, and then an added way for me to turn my pain into my power.
No, absolutely. And Natalie, this conversation has shown that even though there is a range of experiences across the Black community, there's also a unity based in those experiences. How can we strengthen that unity going forward?
I think, again, it's realizing that no one is the enemy, that we are all in the same boat. It's, when we have to get together in some sort of collective, to speak to each other, to listen, to understand, as AZ said, to understand the words on a cellular level, to all say that I am here for you. We are all fighting the same fight. I'm beside you. Please know that regardless of the shade of my Blackness, I am here supporting you, and I love you.
AC, we're almost out of time, but I wanted to get this in. While people are starting to talk more about shadeism, you know, those conversations aren't always truthful. How can we keep them honest?
You know, just as Natalie was saying, you know, with her own story, you have to have courage. You need to be able to have courage to me, dig in deep, dig past the generational trauma and really get to the root of the situation. I feel that it tends to stay on the surface, which allows it to continue to perpetuate. So having the ability to get down into the root of the situation, to be honest, I was able to find my truth by going down deep into myself. And I know that that'll be the same for Natalie, and I'm sure for yourself. Having that chance to do that can be very freeing. And I hope that in that space, we can come together to heal and continue to talk.
I thank you both so much for being a part of this very important conversation.
Thank you so much.